Well, guys, good to be here with you. Gabriel, Senior, good seeing you, man. How you feeling? Yeah? Cool. Yeah, we were praying for you. So Gabriel had a good bout with COVID, so good that you're here, man. Well, guys, we're going to be, if you see on your tables there, we've got a handout for you. Kind of excited. This is actually the first time that I've been able to teach in Forge. I kind of organize the ministry, but I also like you guys to hear other men besides me. So I get a lot of teaching opportunities, so I want to make sure that other men are speaking into your lives. And I would say that's very important for other men to speak into your lives. And you know, our model for this ministry is equipping young men with the biblical foundations for a successful life. And we desire you guys to have that. And the reality is when we look around the world, we look around culture, there are so many differing perspectives of what manhood is. And so many erroneous views that are false, and views that are, I would say, even harmful. And so we've really need to redefine what it is to be a man, what it is to be a man who's led by God, a man after God's own heart, and how that practically looks in your lives. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and how you guys can become an asset for your future home. Also, part of this ministry is to equip you guys with practical skills. So if you guys remember, for those of you who were here last time, we spoke on resume building and interview processes and how to be efficient in your job and advance in your career, because that's going to be a very important part of your life. You're going to spend so much time in your workplace, and so how can you be a witness towards Christ there, but also find success in your career, and how you can do that. And so that was one of our past events. Our next event, so you guys can look forward to it, we're going to be talking about how to wisely manage your finances. We're going to talk about budgeting. We're going to talk about investing. We're going to talk about preparing for retirement in the future, and handling your finances wisely according to Scripture's guidelines, as well as just taking some of the practical knowledge from some of the other men in the church. And so I'm excited for that. But today we want to focus on how to become an asset for your future home. And, you know, I made us play Jenga because I think Jenga relates to all of our lives in some fashion, because I think your life can be compared to that Jenga tower. And depending on where your life is and where you are, you may or may not have pieces missing from your life that are essential, that God calls us to have, and really that God calls the church to equip you young men with. And so we want to ensure that our young men, the men in Grace Chapel congregation, have the right skills and strengths and equipping to be able to handle life effectively. If you guys think about it, as your life as a tower, and you're going to be married one day, and you're going to have kids one day, and I mean, I'm speaking in generalities. I'm assuming that this is mostly true for all of you. What happens if your tower falls right next to your wife's tower? Or if your kids' towers are right there? Where we fail, there's an obvious impact on everyone else around us. And we're called to be men who lead, men to lead our homes and our families well. And so we want to help you do that. And so contemplating this question, how can I be an asset for my future home? I mean, raise your hands if you're hoping to get married one day. I know I am, right? There you go. That's like everybody. Raise your hands, and I know this is long in the future, and maybe you may think like, oh man, I never want kids, right? There's some people who say that. Well, I'm calling your bluff, okay? I bet at some point in the future you're going to want kids. Raise your hands if you think you want kids one day, right? Raise your hands if you currently have a job, right? So there's all these things that are practical for us, and we want you guys to be the most equipped to do those things well. And so kind of I have before you, in your handout there, really kind of our first point. Oh, check it out. I still have the John 8 passage on there. That's not supposed to be there. Sorry, guys. I copy and paste the notes, and then I use it to like make a new template, so I forgot to erase that. But the first point there is defining masculinity by God's terms. You know, I have there that to be masculine men is to be what God created us to be. That's actually a good thing, being masculine, right? We must, however, reclaim the term masculinity. So when we think of masculinity, what do you guys think of? What are some thoughts? Toughness, right? What else? What? Strength? Yep. Courage. Okay, there's a good. So notice, toughness and strength are typically worldly definitions of masculinity. Not saying you're wrong, but then there's courage, right? That falls in both categories. The world would probably say that's masculine, but also Scripture says that is masculine. There's a lot of things that the world might say is masculine, like machismo, right? I'm going to be this tough guy, you know, that may or may not be a biblical definition of masculinity. And so we have to redefine, okay, we have to reclaim this term. And the way that we define and view masculinity ought to be shaped by the biblical picture rather than the many varying depictions we see in our world today. And guys, we are called to be masculine men, according to what Scripture teaches as biblical masculinity. And there's this blurred state, this blurred conception of manhood in society. You guys look at it. You guys are probably on social media. You guys see the movies. The world doesn't know what it means to be a man anymore. And a lot of men don't know what it means to be men anymore. And they want to go be women, right? And that's just the world that we live in. And we have to encounter that and realize that that's going on. And we have to be able to know where we stand in that. And so we need to then define masculinity as God defines masculinity. Christ is, in fact, the model of masculinity. If you look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, this is a passage in Scripture. Can somebody read that out to me? Somebody read it out loud? One of you young guys, maybe?
And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood to the measure and the stature of the fullness of Christ.
Right? So that's why, so here Paul is saying that God gave all these people in the church to help equip the church so that they might reach what? What does he say it there? Mature what? Mature manhood. And who is the picture of mature manhood? Jesus is. You see that there, right? To the measure and the stature of the fullness of Christ. And so Christ then is the picture of biblical masculinity, right? We can learn a lot from Adam, but we can learn even more from Christ. He's the picture of biblical masculinity. And so I have some traits there, traits of a biblical man. Humility, yet confidence. That is really big. Humility and confidence they're not counterparts. You can have both. God's men are called to be humble, right? And certainly for young men, I've been where you guys are. That's a trait that we need to have. How about love or a desire for justice and equity? There's self-sacrifice, leadership, generosity, service, godliness. And we're seeing less and less of this in culture and society, right? And so how can we be those men? You know, we could even talk about, why are we seeing less and less of this? What's happening? Well, I think a lot of what we see within society has to do with fatherlessness. Fathers not being present, fathers not instilling within their sons the heart of what it means to be true godly men. I think at the heart of our culture's inability to raise boys into young men is this epidemic of fatherlessness. I've got some statistics here for you. Children without fathers, think about this, are 4 times more likely to live in poverty. They're more likely to suffer emotional and behavioral problems. They have higher levels of aggressive behaviors. They have 2 times the risk of infant mortality. They are more likely to go to prison. Listen to this statistic. Only 1 in 5 prison inmates grew up with their fathers present. That means 4 out of every 5 grew up in a fatherless home. And they're also twice as likely to be involved in early sexual activity. And even if dads are there, you can have irresponsible fathers. You could have ignorant fathers. You could have inconsistent fathers. You could have uninvolved fathers. And gentlemen, you guys are going to be fathers one day. And you're called to be fathers who go alongside your kids and are intentional, right? And so we got to reclaim this narrative of what it is to be biblically masculine men, right? And I think that starts at, and here's where I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a challenge, that starts at recognizing the help that is around us, right? And you guys are here because you understand that, right? Before you can be an asset for your homes, you have to recognize the assets that are around you. I think that is so important. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit more about friends in here in a little bit. Have young friends, which is good and important, your peers, but have older friends as well. You know, I've got some friends, and it's been helpful entering into the stage of life that I'm in, to where I'm a dad now. I've got friends who are 10 years older than me. I got friends who are 20 years older than me. You know, some of the older guys in this room, I'm blessed to call them friends, right? So ask yourself that question. Do you have friends that are older than you? And part of that is recognizing the assets that are around you. I'm sure you could ask any of these older guys in here how valuable it would be to be a young man again and to sit where you're sitting right now and to hear God's truth, to hear how you can be equipped for life ahead of you. So I think the first thing for you as young men, in order to be able to be an asset for your future home, is to realize the community that you have around you as a church that is willing to pour into your life, that is willing to be an asset to you, to strengthen you where you're weak, to call you out when you need to be called out, which sometimes sucks, right? Who likes to be called out? But we need it, right? My dad, thankfully, you're a guy who called me out, right? You know, you had to say, Michael, you're a knucklehead. Quit acting like that, right? We need that. I needed that. I still need that every once in a while, right? We need men around us, right? And men who are willing to push us to the right thing. You guys remember Rehoboam in the Bible? Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and he became the king. And he divided the kingdom of Israel because he made some bad decisions. Do you know where his bad decisions were rooted? Does anybody remember? Who did he listen to? He listened to his young friends and their counsel. Not saying young friends can give can't give good counsel, because they can. But he exclusively listened to their counsel and refused to listen to the counselors who his father had set up for him, right? And so I want you guys to know the assets that you have around you. And that's why we're doing this ministry, is we want you guys to be equipped in your lives to have a successful life. We really do. You know, I talk to men probably on a weekly basis to where their families are falling apart, right? And everything's going crazy. And more often than not, it has to do with them not keeping their tower intact, and they're falling spiritually, and in some way, something's happening in their life, and it's causing chaos in their home because it's wrecking everybody else. And so we want to come around you. The first step to being an asset in your home is not only defining masculinity by God's terms, but then also realizing the assets that you have around you. You've got great men in your corner, and we want you guys to know that. And so part of what I want you guys even to do today is to connect with some of these older men in the room, right? I want you guys to give them your phone number, and for them to get your phone number, and to go out to lunch with them, right? Because that's going to be important. I believe it is. I want you guys to have a relationship with one another. The second thing that I have there is recognizing the job that you are called to. I've got a Genesis chapter 2 passage there. Can somebody read that for me?
The Lord God took the man in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it.
Okay, so this is exactly what God put Adam in the garden to do, to work and to keep the garden, right? Now, I have some definitions there of what it means to work and keep. Don't look at those yet, all right? I'm going to test you guys, okay? What do you think it means for Adam to work the garden? Organize it, yeah. Protect it. I think that more falls into the keep category, right? He's going to keep, he's going to maintain, he's going to preserve it. Any other ideas for work?
Maybe upgrade.
Upgrade, right? I'm going to make it better. You know, he's a farmer. It's a garden. So what do you have to do in a garden? You got to plant, right? You got to till the soil. You got to pull the weeds. There probably wasn't weeds back then, right? That would be great. You know, that reminds me. I'm pretty good at pulling weeds, guys. Yeah, that was one of my dad's favorite, I'm calling you out, favorite forms of discipline. Get out there and pull weeds. Yeah, there's actually a building, a house right beyond that block wall, and I was in 4th grade, 9 years old, and I threw a rock at that house, and I broke a window, okay? And I was suspended. I was going to Desert Christian School, and I went home, and me and my dad had a talk, and we live on a 2.5-acre piece of property, and the next day I had to make sure there were no weeds on the property. I had to pull every weed on the property. That was my discipline. You know, I had to work the house. I had to make it better, right? But that's a good thing. I share that little personal anecdote to, you know, kind of show we're all in the same boat, right? I've been where you are. You're going to be where I am. It's okay, right? But Adam is called to work the garden and then to keep the garden. What is to keep the garden? You said protect it. What else? Any thoughts? To water it, right? Make sure that you're not going backwards on what has already grown, right? You're preserving what is already there. That implies watering, right? Yeah, so let's look at those. There's some definitions there for you. To work is to labor to make things grow, to nurture, to cultivate, to tend, to build up, to guide and rule. To keep is to sustain progress that has already been achieved. This involves guarding, keeping safe, watching over, caring for, and maintaining. You know, guys, you're called as men to certain jobs. And those jobs are going to be most primarily to be a husband, to be a father, and to be a worker. And in each of those aspects, you have to work and keep all of those things. You have to work and keep your relationship with your future wife. You have to work and keep your relationship with your kids. You have to work and keep your relationship at work. And this is going to define what you're called to do as men, right? You've got to live by these strategies, or really these things that you're called to do. And we have to do it well. Benjamin Franklin said, if you are failing to plan, you are planning to what? To fail, right? And so I want to help you guys plan then on how to succeed. Well, you guys are going to be husbands one day. And how are you going to be an asset for your home that you husband well? Well, you have to think about working and keeping your relationship with your future wife. And that begins now. How do I have a healthy relationship with my future wife? Well, are you having healthy relationships with girls that are in your life right now? Because that is going to affect your future marriage. Are you becoming the man that you need to be such that you can be an asset to your wife? Right? That's massively important. You're going to be called to be the spiritual leader in your home. And so that means that a lot of times young men need to realize what they're called to do and step up in that call to be spiritual leaders, to work and keep within the sphere of your relationship with your wife means that you're to shepherd your wife. right? That is the idea of working. You're spiritually leading. You're shepherding her. Okay, what about the keeping? What does it mean to keep your wife? To work is to ensure her spiritual progress, to come alongside her, to guide her, to be an asset to her, a comfort to her. What does it mean to keep? To protect, right? How are we supposed to protect our future wives?
Both from spiritual influence and physical.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another one you're missing. You got two of the big ones, right? Spiritually protect our wives, right? We're supposed to physically protect our wives, right? We get that, but we're also called to spiritually protect our wives. And that ensures that you are men who are equipped to do that, are able to spiritually protect her. And then there's also the emotional protection. We have to protect our wives emotionally. We have to help them. And guys, you can't lead your wives if you're not the man who is able to lead your wife. The blind can't lead the blind, right? And you may be thinking, Michael, this is like 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead. Blink of an eye, guys. I was showing a picture to the Dietzel boys when they got here. And it was a picture of them. You guys were probably like 3-4 years old. And me and CJ Johnson coached a T-ball team here at the church when we were the Dietzel boys' age right now. We were your age, and you guys were on the team, though, and you're 3 and 4 years old. And guys, I got to tell you, I mean, maybe it feels longer for you because you're saying no. It feels really short for me. I mean, it was just yesterday that we were there doing that. So it's just going to be tomorrow that you're going to be married, that you're going to be having kids. You never know what that's going to be like. Be preparing yourself for that now. Otherwise, you will fail to be an asset for your home. Right? You don't become the man you need to be as a husband when you get married. You become the man you need to be as a husband right now. Right? This is the battleground. This is where you equip yourself. Don't procrastinate, right? That's so true.
When you get our age, which in my mind, I can take you in. Okay? That's how we are. We're built that way.
Maybe not Travis. He's pretty big.
Just take a little longer.
Yeah, there you go.
So it goes fast. And what you learn as you get older, that you wish you could tell your young self, don't wait. So doing these things, don't put it off.
Yeah.
It's something you can put off because it's going to happen so fast.
I would also say, too, guys, that God's design for marriage and manhood works best. I never have to have a conversation in my office with a man who is doing his life well before the Lord and is leading spiritually in his home that has a broken marriage. I never have to have that conversation. It is always the men who fail to exercise biblical manhood and fail to be the men and fathers and husbands that they need to be. And so, it might sound fun when you guys get a serious girlfriend and say, hey, you want to move in together and, let's try this out. But I'll tell you guys, that will not serve you well, right? So keep your priorities straight in that you serve the Lord in that. Be the type of man, here's a challenge for you. Be the type of man whom you would be comfortable allowing to marry your daughter. Be that type of man. Think about it like that. You guys are going to have daughters one day. And there are a lot of men in this world who need direction and steering, and they need biblical exhortation. And your daughter's going to have to marry one of those men. Be that type of man. Well, you're not only called to be husbands, but you're also called to be fathers. And in the same way, you have to work and keep that relationship. You have to be intentional fathers. I was reading a book called The Intentional Father. It's written by a guy named John Tyson. And on hearing of the news of having that he was going to have a son. They went to the ultrasound, right? The gender reveal ultrasound, and they figure out we're having a boy, right? And he said that his immediate response to that, his immediate emotional response was, how will I ever have what it takes to be the kind of father my son needs? How will I teach him all the things that he needs to know? How will I not let him down? On the drive back, he said that was one of the most sobering drives of his entire life. Even after returning to work, I couldn't stop thinking about this baby boy soon to come into the world. He would look to me to find a model of manhood and would in many ways derive his image of God from our relationship. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I wasn't convinced I had been raised properly. How could I possibly have the necessary tools and the knowledge to raise a son in a God-honoring way? Guys, you guys are going to have that drive one day. And that's a big thing in life. And part of that begins with recognizing the assets that are around you to help equip you for that. You're not going to have it all figured out by the time you have that drive. That's also another thing. Because once you have that drive and you realize I'm having a boy or I'm having a girl, right? There's going to be even more equipping to come. You can't possibly have it all figured out at once. But forward progress, that's the key, right? Am I growing in God? Am I more equipped today than I was yesterday? I think unless we resolve now as young men to be the type of men who we will never be able to become those men. You have to make a decision in your mind now of what type of man you're going to be. Otherwise, you'll never get there. And also, I would say that we cannot expect our sons and daughters to succeed in areas that we have failed in. Right? So, even talking about purity, right? How can you possibly expect your future son to succeed in purity if you are not putting actionable steps to conquer that battle? Right? You want to be the man who can stand with your son and say, I've been where you are, and there's hope, right? We can get through this, right? Because you're going to be there. We have to have these actionable steps. J.C. Ryle in Thoughts for Young Men said, by the shoot we judge the tree. What does he mean by that? By the shoot we judge the tree. Any thoughts? How does a tree start? As a shoot, a little tiny tree. And what the shoot is what the tree is going to become. What does that mean for your life? What you are now is what you're going to be. That's what that means. By the blossoms, we judge the fruit. By the spring, we judge the harvest. By the morning, we judge the day. And by the character of the young man, we may generally judge what he will be when he grows up. You're going to be just like you are now. So resolve to be the type of man that would be an asset to your wife and children. And then furthermore, we're called to provide. We're called to work and both keep for our family by providing. And I would say that starts by setting yourself up for success now. By building good habits, by budgeting, by saving, by not making impulsive purchases, right? That's a big thing. By making sure, here's another thing too. Make sure that you own your money rather than your money owning you, right? This is something that I've had to learn because I'm naturally really, really stingy, okay? That's just the way I am. I like to not spend money and I like to just have it all in my pocket, right? That's who I am. And when you guys get married, you're going to notice you start to assimilate some of your wife and she starts to assimilate some of you. Have you guys who are married in here noticed that? You become more like her and she becomes more like you and you find this middle ground, which has been kind of good for me because I'm the type that I'll never go out to eat so that I could save $5 in my pocket. Well, nowadays it's probably more like 10, right? And my wife has taught me how to enjoy a little bit of money, right? It's not good to end up the end of your life with a ton of money and never enjoying anything, right? So there's a balance there. But you are called to provide for your family, and that starts by making good decisions. So we're going to go to the third and final thing then here. Zach Marshall, when he came and spoke, it was, I think, our first Forge meeting. He said that your main job is not your job. It's when you come home, right? And that's really important. It's important to remember that everything in life is supposed to take a second seat to that. With the exception to your relationship with the Lord, but that is also part of your relationship with the Lord, your relationship with your family, right? And that is your main job. So don't forget that when you guys, start entering into that section of life. And a lot of that is contrary to the world's teaching. The world will say, pursue self, put your interests above everyone else's. The world will also say, delay responsibility and purpose. Define your understanding and teachings, your understanding and truth by what the world says, the teaching of the world. And so I would just say, remember what you're called to, gentlemen. You're called to certain jobs. You're called to be men. And that is part of what it means to be a man who's equipped to the measure of the stature of Christ's maturity, right? Of his manhood, right? And not our own. So I've got some actionable steps that we could accomplish these jobs. To both be husbands, to be fathers, to also provide for our families. I will say, we are going to have a Forged event coming up here soon on how to have a God-honoring relationship with a lady and how to pursue a lady and what that looks like. That's a whole big issue in life, right? And so, I think we should have an open discussion about that, what that looks like. But I have actionable steps here on accomplishing some of these jobs. Has anybody heard of Jose Hernandez? Jose Hernandez. So Jose Hernandez was an astronaut, right? I forget exactly which flight he went up on. I think it was the Discovery. But he was an astronaut, and he was born to a migrant farming family in California. What that means is that his family, they're Hispanic, they would go and they would move from different areas, regions in California. Sometimes they would go down to Mexico as well, and they would spend about 3 months in each location. In his family, their job was picking fruit, picking vegetables, right? And he was born to this family, and he became an astronaut. And you might ask yourself the question, how do you go from that position to where your family are fruit pickers, right, to becoming an astronaut? Well, he had a dream as a kid, and his dad's a really hard worker. And his dad told him some steps, some things that he needed to do to be able to accomplish this. Joseph, I don't know if Joseph's in here. I think he got pulled away for work stuff. But I had him listen to a podcast that they talked with this Jose Hernandez guy. And he has these steps. These are the things that his dad told him as a young boy, saying, if you want to be an astronaut, you could go be an astronaut, but you need to do these things in order to be an astronaut. Number one, decide what you want to be in life. Set a goal, right? Where do you want to go? What's your goal? Have you guys thought about that? Do you guys have a goal? Maybe a goal that you're working for? A short-term goal, a mid-term goal, a long-term goal? We're going to talk about that. Number two, recognize how far you are from that goal. That helps provide some perspective and realize, yeah, I'm a long ways. I got a lot to do. Number three, draw a roadmap from where you are to where you'd like to be. And I would say, even with Mark's comment, if you see side roads on there, go take that side road, right? It's okay if you turn, you veer off, you readjust your plan, you readjust your goal. That's okay, right? Number four, educate yourself. I can't stress enough how important this one is. Educate yourself. In order to accomplish our goals, we have to educate ourselves in some fashion or another. That may look like a 4-year college degree. That may look unlike a 4-year college degree. But nonetheless, we're men who are supposed to be learning. We're to educate ourselves. Number 5, I like this. Work harder than everyone else. My dad told me a lot as a kid, and I'm sure Grandpa told it to you. Do today what others won't do, so that tomorrow you can do what others can't. Right? That all goes down to working harder than everybody else. And then the 6th is to persevere, because there's going to be roadblocks in your pursuit of this goal. So you have to learn to persevere through those roadblocks. So let's talk about some of those things. Our first goal that we must pursue is godliness, is holiness. You know, I have there written there, surround yourself with godly men. And we've talked about that a lot already. But do you know that we are actually called to be holy? Ephesians 1 talks about that we're called to be holy men. So we're supposed to cultivate godliness, cultivate holiness by surrounding ourselves with godly men. And that also means your peers, right? Not just the older men, but your peers. Have you guys heard this saying, you are what you eat, right? You are what you eat. Or you could also say it this way, you are who your friends are, right? You are exactly like your friends. You guys notice that? And so when we hang out with men who are godly, we're challenged, we are pushed on, right? That's kind of why I said we should have both friends who are both young and old. And not only is this going to be good for you because it's going to cultivate godliness in you, it's going to cultivate good characteristics and good, practices of life, but it's also going to be good for your reputation. Have you guys thought about that? If you hang out with friends who are better than you, it's going to be good for your reputation. They're not going to look at you as the guy, the third wheel who's just tagging along. You're actually going to become like them, and people are going to start to see that in you, right? And it's going to be good for you. And also, I would say in cultivating godliness, sit under the teaching of God's grace. Titus chapter 2 there says, for the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all. God's grace, specifically in the form of Christ, but also in all the various other means, the fellowship of the saints, the reading of the Word, the teaching of the Word, worshiping together, those are all means by which God's grace is given to us, right? And so when we sit under that teaching of God's grace, what does it do for us? It not only brings us salvation, as the verse says, but it also says, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Cultivating godliness for you guys. How do you be godly? Find good friends. And as Danny Gardner once said, every time the doors are open here at this church, you should be here. I remember him saying that. He told me that. And it stuck with me. And I'm better off because of it. Right? So sit under God's grace. I have there establishing and pursuing goals. That kind of goes back with the points that I have listed above there. Quoting from a book, what are you going after? What do you want to be? A meaningful life will not just happen. No one ever drifts into greatness. No one ever drifts into making a difference. You need to be intentional. You have to live with purpose. So guys, I want to challenge you guys, don't waste your years. Right? I'll find guys who are, close to 30, and they don't know where they're going. Where are you going? 30 years is a long ways to go without knowing what you want to do with the rest of your life and where you want to be. So setting goals. How do you set goals? I think we need to ask the question, what am I passionate about? You guys passionate about anything? Yeah, Walter. Sports? All right. Yeah. So, you should ask yourself, sports medicine, kinesiology, or anything like that, And it may not even be that, but consider that, What else? Who else? Brendan? Basketball. All right. Yeah, you're playing basketball right now, right? That's good. I love that. Realize also too, though, as we're going through this, there's going to be other things in your life that are going to come along that you're going to be passionate about as well, right? So be open to those things. I think that's kind of even where Mark was going, right?
Technology and engineering. Really?
Technology, engineering, right? So you're even studying for that, right? So what else? What are you guys passionate about? What are the things in life that get you up out of bed that you like? Yeah, Brandon, right? Parkour. Nice. Awesome. I've seen that. I've never done it. Are you good at it? All right. They have those like gyms to go do it, right? That's awesome. That's super cool. I don't know. Maybe you're going to be a YouTube star with parkour. That's awesome.
What is that?
Parkour is like, how would you describe parkour? Yeah? Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that might be a job for you, you know? So we got to ask ourselves, what are we passionate about? And also, too, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? What am I good at? Let your goals be defined by that as well. I will say, and this is just a challenge, you know, I want to approach this sensitively because I don't want to offend anybody. When you decide to pursue a path, make sure it is a path in which you will be able to provide for your family in that path. There's a lot of young folks who may pursue certain college degrees that don't really have a whole ton of job opportunities. And maybe they'll go into $100,000 worth of debt for attaining this college degree, and then they're going to leave college and they're going to make $45,000 a year and hope to be a provider in their home. And I'd say if that's where you're at, you need to reconsider, right? Not saying it's bad, but also get some other training along the way. Diversify your pursuits and make sure that you are setting yourself up to be an asset for your home, right? What does that actually look like? So have that consideration in mind. So set some goals and chart an achievable path forward. That's kind of that idea of those first 5 points or 6 points under that section, that we are to not only decide what our goals are to be, we are not only to recognize how far we are from those goals, but we're to draw a roadmap. So when you guys have goals, when you have a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term plan of what my goals are going to be in life, you should also have, okay, here's how I'm going to get there, right? Actionable steps that you can take to say, I'm going to check this off, and then I move on to the next step, and then I move on to the next step. It's kind of like college planning, right? I know maybe some of you guys aren't there yet, but you have a degree, and you want to pursue this goal. The goal is the degree, and then there are classes that you have to take for that goal. And you have to say, how do I take these classes in such an order that it best benefits me, and I'm going to grow in this, and I check off all the check marks so that I reach the goal, right? That's kind of an illustration for life, right? We're going to have goals that we're going to want to attain, and we're going to have to create a roadmap forward. And I would say for yourself, set high goals. Set high goals for yourself. Push your expectations for yourself for what you think is right on the verge of impossible, right? And then go work hard. There's a reason why it says work harder than anybody else. That means that it's hard. I mean, you got a guy who's born to a poor migrant farming family, and he goes and he becomes an astronaut. Well, along the way, he had to go to college. He had to get a master's degree. He had to get a PhD. He had to learn Russian because he figured, I'm going to probably have to work with the Russians in space. He went and worked in Russia. He had to get scuba certified because they wanted to know he could work in a zero atmosphere, zero oxygen environment. He had to do all these other things. He had to become a pilot. Those are some big goals, right? Some big steps. Push the level of what's impossible. Guys, there's a lot of stuff impossible when we set, and a lot of stuff that's possible when we set our mind to it. I want you guys to think about that. Short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. And also, as Mark said, those goals are subject to change, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, so the migrant worker
Mm-hmm.
and his story is a 1 in a million.
Totally.
Right? So there's a whole bunch of other migrant workers that had similar things and worked really hard. And they might have been at Astronaut, but they did something. It led somewhere. And as long as you let God keep pushing you to
Yeah.
different directions, the doors will open and close. And where you think you're going to end up could be different. But having the goal to keep you motivated, to keep going, that's huge. And then God's going to do the rest. It's amazing the doors that will open and you go, I would never dream that I would be here. And it's way better than what you had in mind.
How do you guys accomplish a goal? Any thoughts?
Working hard.
Working hard, yeah. That's part of it. Any other thoughts? How do you accomplish a goal, Jaden?
You said small goals to reach.
Okay, yeah. You guys heard this saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's how you accomplish a goal. One bite at a time. You put one foot in front of the other. And I would also say balance your priorities. There was a study where they went to different nursing homes and they asked people in their old age what their top 10 regrets were. I'll read a few of them. One was, I wish I hadn't worked so much and I wish I had made more time for my family. While it's important to pursue goals and to pursue personal growth, remember your priorities. I wish I had taken more risks and more chances, travel more, experience more cultures. One was, I wish I had realized contentment and happiness are a choice. It's all about your perspective and attitude. So we can find contentment in hard areas. One said, I wish I had pursued my dreams and aspirations, persevered and kept going. I wish I had discovered my purpose earlier. That's a big thing, guys. And I would say for you guys, just so you guys don't misinterpret me, worldly success is not everything, right? What I'm not advocating for here is worldly success because the world will define success in a way that is contrary to biblical success. I do think we're called to provide for our families and to do so well, right? And to be equipped to do that. That's not a bad thing, and that's not a bad thing to pursue after. But remember, Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? And so we have to define success by biblical terms. I would also say another way of helping us accomplish goals is managing expectations and emotions. Who has expectations here? Do you guys have expectations? Yeah? What are some of the things you have expectations on? Anybody?
See, a lot of it has to do with myself and like what
Yeah?
people love.
Okay. That's a big part of it. Expectations for ourselves, right? How about expectations for others as well? We hold expectations on others a lot. Do you guys realize everything in our life we have expectations on? When you came here today, you expected a certain thing. And what's happening here today may or may not align with what your expectations were. When you take a job, you have expectations. When you start pursuing a girl, you have expectations. When you start pursuing a certain career path or certain path of studying, you have expectations, right? You're nodding your head. You work at the hospital, Palmdale Regional. You have expectations of what you hope to be there, right? And it may or may not match up with your expectations. So the reality is we all have expectations, and those expectations are either met or left unmet. In everything. We're either going to be satisfied when our expectations are met or dissatisfied when they're left unmet. And so how do we respond when our expectations are left unmet? Because you're going to have unmet expectations in life. There's a temptation to lash out, to walk away, to quit, to throw a tantrum. And even when these expectations are formed on ourselves, what are my expectations for myself? Well, I'd say that there's two options about expectations. Either your expectations are unrealistic or realistic. And there's a difference between pushing the bounds of your expectations and having unrealistic expectations, right? I would say always push the expectations for yourself, but realize sometimes I may set unrealistic expectations for myself and for others that aren't good. But I would say push the bounds of your expectations. You know, I played youth football. I played football in high school as well, but youth football, I had a coach that probably stuck out to me more than any other coach in all of my sports. My dad shaking his head, his name was Coach C. This man was we were deathly afraid of him, right? He had a bunch of 12, 13-year-olds, and he made the point, I'm not here to have fun, right? I'm not here to coach you as 12 and 13-year-olds to have fun. I want to win, right? And take what you want with that. Maybe he's like, okay, you're a little too intense for 12 and 13-year-olds. But do you know what? We won. And we won, and we won, and we won. We lost one game. Yeah. I have never forgot the practice after that one game that we lost. As like a 12, 13-year-old boy. And do you know what? I went into playing youth football. That was my first year playing youth football, and it was like the worst thing. Like I could do like 7 push-ups, and I could barely run. I was just this chubby kid, you know. The next year, I was running 2 miles every day throughout the summer, and I was working out, and I realized what could happen when I set high expectations for myself, right? You loved him because you were just glad that somebody else was willing to push me besides you, right? I've heard you say that very thing. Push the expectations of what you have for yourself. Don't set unrealistic expectations, but push it dang high, right? And then you're going to have responses to those expectations. How we respond to our expectations are going to either empower further growth or they're going to cripple us. Sometimes in life we're going to have to adapt, to reanalyze, figure out how we can even optimize our life, what that might look like. You know, in that Jose Hernandez story, he talks about having to learn Russian, right? You listen to it. Do you know why he had to learn Russian? Because he needed a differentiating factor between him and all the other thousands of people who applied to be an astronaut with NASA. He said, I need things that they don't have. So find a differentiating factor. How do you distinguish yourself from others? And I would also say, manage your emotions, right? You can learn a lot about a person by how they manage their emotions. Do you manage your emotions well? Do you manage anxiety? Right? How do you handle anxiety? Anxiety is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. You know, there's been numerous surveys with young people, and some of the biggest emotions that young people are dealing with is anxiety, right? How do I handle anxiety? You guys remember, you guys heard the fight or flight? Have you heard that, fight or flight? What does that mean? When you encounter something hard, what do? Yeah? Your body's natural response to certain things that we encounter, right? To fight or flight, right? And that was because back in the day, you know, there's wild animals, right? We're created in such a way that, and there's threats, and there's people who are massively inhumane, and they just go and like try to kill people back in the day, and they fight, right? And so how do you respond to that? You either run or you fight, right? Well, today, we don't necessarily experience the physical threats that they did back in the day, right? To where it's maybe not fight or flight. And I think what's happened is a third F is being added there, fight, flight, or freeze, right? And a lot of what's happening is that there's a lot of freezing going on. And that is due to anxiety, right? And it's okay. But don't be stuck, frozen, right? Take a risk. Realize in life that you're going to take risks and you may fail, and that's okay, right? What do? You get back up, you brush yourself off. I'm going to keep going, right? And that is developing persistence and perseverance. You are going to encounter roadblocks. I have here written, embrace failure. Do you guys like failing? Do you like failing? No? It kind of sucks, right? But do you know what? Failing's a really, really good thing. Do you know what the best teacher is? Failure. Man, you learn so much with failure. So I'd say a fear of failure keeps you from pursuing something. You're missing out on the best teacher. I have learned the most in my life through periods of failure. It makes me who I am. And how you respond to that, because you're going to encounter failure, is going to say a lot about who you are now and who you are going to be. Right? So fail well. It's not a question of if you are going to fail. You are going to fail at things, right? Fail well, right? I also have here venturing into unknown waters. Dream big and swing hard. The worst that can happen is that you learn a lot, right? So be okay to take a chance. You may not know what that looks like, but take that chance. Lastly, we'll finish with this. Ask awesome questions. Ask yourself this question. What question am I not asking that I should be? About life, about girls, about jobs, about school, about myself, my own personality, my characteristics from people who are close to me and know me well? Ask those questions, right? Those are going to help you. Those are going to help you along your path to get better, to be an asset for your home, right? Ask awesome questions. I have here, ask the right questions and some of the wrong ones too, right? The only stupid question is a question what? Never asked. So it's okay. It's okay if you ask a wrong question. I like this. Ask yourself, what would a wise man do? What would a wise man say? What would a wise man think? And what would a wise man feel? A lot of the times, what would a wise man do? Maybe he would do nothing. Maybe he would say nothing. Right? Sometimes he does. I think if you ask those questions, or even if you ask, what would Christ do? Remember those corny WWJD bracelets, right? Well, there's a reason why those came out. Because we want to instill Christ-likeness, right? Now, I don't go around wearing a WWJD bracelet. If you do, it's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good reminder, right? But we are to be men who think about life in that way. Do you guys want God to look favorably upon your life? Yeah? I do. Let's look at that last page there. You know, I've shared this with the Ironman, and I've probably shared it with you already. Isaiah chapter 66, verses 1 and 2. This verse has been important to me ever since my first day in college, because my dad wrote me a note when I left for college, giving me some good advice and good challenge, and told me he loves me, and then he wrote this verse on it. And, I hope to be like the man in this verse. It says, Isaiah 66, 1 and 2, thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. That's who God is. And he says, what is the house that you would build for me? And what is the place of my rest? In other words, we can't really do anything for God. He says, all these things my hand has made, and so all these things came to be, declares the Lord. But this is the one to whom I will look. He who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Be that type of man. That's the type of man that God smiles on. And I want you guys to know that, and I want you to be that man. Well, I have some questions there. I'm going to allow you guys to spend some time around your table asking yourself these questions. We're going to have a little bit of conversation, 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll call it a day. One thing I do want you to do, find the men in this room, the older guys that help kind of be the leadership for this team, and get their phone number, right?